Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of BLS049 Show and Tell with Tony and Kevin from Underdog Protocol. Hey, guys, thanks for joining the show. How you all doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us, B-Man.
Awesome, awesome. So, when we were planning this, I think the judges were still figuring out who was winning Grizzlython, but looks like I got the number one winners of the whole hackathon. Was it expected or?
Definitely
Actually,
not
not really.
expected. Yep.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. That must have been a great surprise then for you as well. Is it a big turn of events? Have you guys, because it's a serious amount of money pricing, you guys should be able to build quite a bunch of time. Did it change
Yeah.
any of the plans you had?
I don't think it changed any of like the long-term plans. I think what it did was we've been heads down building and focused on like a lot of business development efforts, like onboarding a lot of customers. And when you don't have Grizzlython like winners like that name behind it, it's a lot more work to like talk to investors, talk to customers, and even talk to like people to help build the product with. Having that, it really accelerates a lot of that timeline.
Right.
So we can go into these conversations and be like, hey, we just wanted Grizzlython. We'd love to work with you, and we know we have something really powerful, and we just want to get it used and help these customers accelerate their product timeline as well.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's very cool. I think so. I participated as well, and one of the things I realized it's really about basic being some sort of accelerator before you meet like VCs. Like the technical part, sure, is important, but it's not the important. It's important like having a long term vision and a team and all that. So yeah, congrats, guys. I think show and tell. We always like to dive in pretty quickly, so I think I'm going to share Kevin's screen, and then we can look at the demo you built, and then afterwards we can dive into the code and talk about it.
Perfect.
Okay, let me pull this
Oh,
one up here. Uh, yeah, I think
cool. All right, we got that infinite screen. All right, I'll hop over here. So this is actually a little bit of a teaser. So we're doing a Grizzlython demo day later. So I'll actually walk through a little bit of the demo that we're going to be doing later. So this is actually the Underdog dashboard. So you can think about this as a user-facing interface for APIs, where you can manage or mint, update, and index all of the NFTs that you create with Underdog. So our potential customer here is Boba Guys. And we want to help create a loyalty and reward system on chain with NFTs with them. So within this dashboard, you can manage all the NFTs that you create. I've created a like an intake form for that. As a user, I might put in my phone number or my email at the store itself. If you want to go and test this out yourself, you can go to underdogprotocol.com/grizzlython, enter your first name and email. And what this will do on behind the scenes is one of the ways that you can also work with Underdog is setting up a Zapier flow with our built-in Underdog integration. Drops you into a mailing list of choice, like a MailChimp. It will create a non-transferable NFT in Underdog and generate a private claim link, kind of like a tip link, but just for one NFT, and send it directly to your email. So once this form has submitted, looks like I got a new email here. So I'll show that I was testing earlier a few times. So what this will send you is that private claim link with a one-time password to actually claim the NFT. I pull up this page, it's just an egg. So this egg can actually hatch into your loyalty and reward card with Boba Guys when you actually make a purchase at, say, a point of sale on Square when you actually do at the store. So you can keep track of your experience points, your level, even before you actually mint the NFT. And we can update the metadata for Boba Guys before they're actually used on chain. So this allows them to not care if the user has a wallet or not. And then once there are actual perks for why you want to actually jump through all the hoops to use the wallet, then you can actually mint the NFT on chain. And one of the things that we want to work on is making customized pages to manage loyalty and rewards for each user through our API.
right.
So to simulate that, what this did, simulate a purchase at a Boba Guys. Since we don't have a point of sale system on a podcast, I'm just going to use the Square Sandbox API. I can select a customer that just made a purchase, which is myself. run the request. And what I've done, and we can dive into this later, I've set up a little webhook that once a payment is created, it will push that to the Underdog API and actually update the NFT. So if we go back into the dashboard, we can see that previously actually on this page, that was an egg. The NFT has now evolved into your Boba Guys loyalty and rewards card for making your first purchase at Boba Guys. And if I look at the NFT metadata, which as Boba Guys, I could go in and actually manually update the points. It keeps track of my points and maybe a level. So this NFT can continue to evolve as I engage with as I engage with Boba Guys going forward. So
Right.
I'll pause there and see what direction we want to go with this B-Man.
No, this looks incredible already. So the way I can see this is basically it's replacing the gift cards. So it's building infrastructure for companies to build something that replaces the gift card system.
Yeah, I think a little bit. If you scrape it up and go a little bit higher level, I think it's building new infrastructure for companies to capture user insights. So what we're doing is using these NFTs as this sort of new data standard that updates in real time and can capture insights from the top of the funnel when you onboard all the way to the bottom of the funnel when you purchase and use a product. And it'll update and carry with the user throughout your entire brand. So I think more than that, we want to create this infrastructure through NFTs that allows companies to capture better user insights and create better experiences.
That's awesome. And then majority of this data, the NFT is stored on Solana. And
yes.
The things like points you just showed, these are just traits of the NFT then.
Yes.
Right. That's pretty cool. Okay, cool. And so yeah, let's take a look at the. I mean, if there's anything else you want to show about the dashboard, I guess there's some onboarding flow, which is probably not that interesting. Otherwise, maybe we can look at the code and see how it's built.
Yeah. Happy to dive in there, and I'll switch over to my other window. So this was actually a very fast build. So yesterday we did a demo with Solana Pay. So it was a 2-hour extravaganza into diving into the Square documentation, and then figuring out how their webhook system works. So once you've set up like the two webhooks to react to creating a customer in Square, and then also like processing a payment in Square, you can just send those payloads to any webhook consumer. So I just set it up within our own website, and I'm handling the payment creation. So when the payment is actually created, I can find the customer within my Square database, and all I have to do is find the NFT. Or actually, I'm going to pause there because I actually skipped a step, because the intake form will make this a lot clearer. So, sorry, apologies. I usually don't demo the code with the product. So as we can see here, I created a project in Underdog. There's like human readable IDs for each project. So this is my project 10 for a non-transferable project. I can use this as like my unique identifier when I'm consuming information. This is the NFT collection, essentially, where I want to drop the NFTs into. So creating an NFT in Underdog is as simple as making a post request to our API with the name, attributes, and image that you want on the NFT itself. So here, I'm just making a simple post request. And what I can do is actually associate this NFT's human readable ID, which is just an ID field, with the customer in Square. So there's a reference ID field on Square, and I map the reference ID to the actual response from the API. Once I have this NFT ID, I can also generate the private claim link from our API, and then I'm just using a SendGrid, just a quick way to send the email with the actual claim link directly to the user. So then they can actually click the link and then view the claim page and connect their wallet and actually claim the NFT. So as a customer like Boba Guys, they don't actually have to interface at all with wallets besides signing into the Underdog API and generating an API key. So once I have the customer associated with an NFT ID in the Underdog system, we can now react to payments being created, and of course, like other events that happen within the Square system as well. So all I would have to do is find the NFT that I just created. So that's kind of the indexer piece for Underdog. I don't have to use other RPC providers or indexers as well, and get the NFT response. Returns me all the metadata that I care about, including the attributes and also like the name and the ID as well. And I want to update the NFT, so I have a patch endpoint for doing that, and I can pass in like the new level. And in this case, I'm just using the amount money, like the cents of the purchase, and adding it to the current experience points, just updating the level to 1. And if the level is 0, I want to evolve the NFT into a new image. So you could imagine doing more interesting things with the evolution of the NFT, where if you hit a certain level, maybe the image is a blue color or a gold color, and so on. And it becomes a very dynamic experience. So yeah, that's kind of the end-to-end flow for like what the demo looks like and how it's handled on the API.
Awesome. So if I understand correctly, the idea, this is not a classical NFT where I have it like in my Soulflare or Phantom in a bunch of them in a collection. It's just maybe more visualized as I got a Boba Guys app, and then there's just one NFT, that's my gift card, which evolves and it actually happens on chain. But I think for the end user, it's just going to be a simple interface where they see this thing, where they don't have to really care. It's in a wallet and it's their NFT. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's just like any other NFT, but I think the NFTs right now are stuck as like static profile pictures, and they don't really evolve or change. And every NFT collection on the roadmap is something like, hey, I want to track your Discord engagement and then update and level up your NFT as you engage on Discord. And everyone is reinventing that same wheel, but you no longer have to. With Underdog, you get this out of the box. And you can really focus on like your core value prop as an NFT collection, as a DAO, or a product in Web3.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, looks very cool, and definitely a new take on how you can use these things and actually make them more useful as like a PFP. So that's very cool. Yeah, I'm curious about the project itself. So maybe we can switch back and just get a global overview of how it's built. Like, is it open source, by the way, or is it something you planning on, or?
So it's a hybrid of open source and closed source right now. So on the roadmap is to open source our contract, because we have benefited a lot from open source contracts out there, like Helium's contract, Strata in the past, and of course like Metaplex's code. That we are planning on open sourcing. Of course, like the API and infrastructure layer, we're going to keep closed source. And we do want to open source, and we think this is super important, are like these claim pages and kind of interfaces built on top of the API. So right. For example, if a Boba Guys has a custom claim page, that's something that we can open source. So another partner of ours can take advantage of using our API as that data layer and build their own like custom service on top of these NFTs.
Right. So you have a bunch of different pages, but actually under the hood, they're all powered by Underdog.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, awesome. Maybe we can take a look at, I guess, maybe the API to figure out how this minting is done and how these decisions are made, how you interact with the program, one of these things. Not sure. Maybe yes. Tony, you got ideas on what's interesting to show?
Yeah, I think maybe Tony, you can dive into a little bit of like cookies and kind of our stamps and passport idea, and then I'll pull up some interesting like snippets within the code in the meanwhile. B-Man, if you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm gonna do like let's say I'll do like a minute or two of like high level future vision pitching, if that sounds cool.
Sure.
If someone really cares. So I think I indicated at this earlier, right? Which is we really want to build infrastructure for companies, products, projects, NFT communities to gather better user insights. And like how we really think about this is like you can imagine a world where businesses are creating these like interoperable experiences, right? You're part of Super Team, you post on Solarplex, you interact on dialect, you have all of this on Saga. And all of those experiences are curated and customized based on all of the data and insights that a company has gathered. And we believe that's where Underdog comes in, right? Is a lot of these companies, businesses, communities are using solutions like an Airtable to capture like the zero party data, like Google Analytics to get first party data. But really at the bottom of the funnel, you're losing a lot of the important things that you need in order to customize experiences. And there's no way to get like a high level view of user behavior. And so for us, like the vision is to create these data rich blockchains by giving NFTs superpowers, like the blockchains that have the most data on them that allow for experiences to be interoperable, to be composable, are the ones that are going to win, right? And so for us, it's about how do you seamlessly integrate these NFTs into any product or workflow. And with compression, I think Kevin alludes to this a lot, which is it's 1000x in decrease in cost, but it's also 1000x in ability to capture data, right? And so you can imagine a world where you have these compressed NFTs minted or distributed whenever you visit some sort of dApp. Maybe it's even straight from the wallet. All of these compressed cookies are shared with an ecosystem of partners or products. And now whenever you land on Dialect, because you've been on Solarplex and you've gone through the building section and you've mentioned this, in Solarplex you've done, or in Super Team you've done X amount of bounties. Now you're placed into a group chat, with all builders trying to build some sort of product and something that you're interested in, right? And like, oh, by the way, now you have like you can get a Saga, the next version, so you can build an SDK on top of that. All of that is very real, and all of it is really possible if you can capture these user insights and capture this like key engagement data. So for us, it's like we're going to build out these next 6 to 12 months is build out these integrations from Web 2 and Web 3 tools. Like, hey, how do you connect a Square? How do you connect squads to these NFTs or realms into these NFTs? 12 to 24 months is start focusing on different segments in the market to tailor our API for. And then, like Kevin alluded to it, and I took a while to get to, is thinking of compressed NFTs as cookies or stamps is what we really want to call them,
Right.
which is you want to help someone build their digital passport of stamps with the key actions that they've taken across the ecosystem in the blockchain. So they can use that to either A, monetize their data, or B, get better custom user experiences. So hopefully that made sense. Kevin, if you want to add anything on top of it, if not, I'll push it back to you.
No, I think that's a great summary. Like really this like long-term vision of capturing more latent actions that you're doing on chain and being rewarded for that.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, I guess compressed NFTs is a huge enabler in general. The thing that just got minted, is that a compressed NFT?
That's a non-transferable NFT, so a normal NFT. And like happy to walk through it. So we're releasing compression on mainnet soon, the compression API. So right now we have it live on DevNet. And I just pulled up a little flow. We can work either bottoms up from like the Rust code all the way up to the API or top. So
let's start here.
Yeah. Okay. So I got the mint compressed NFT instruction that we have right now. So a lot of these like coding practices, like creating like the context and like munching all the accounts, like these are all just like best practices that we pull from like open source projects. And I feel like that's like one of the big values in development in open source is like you can really quickly learn like, hey, what's best practice, and like try to adopt that in your project. And at the end of the day, I think Rust is really like maybe 1% or 10% of the work that you do when you're engineering anything. Like you can build a really powerful program, but if it's not easy to use, or if there's not JavaScript or TypeScript libraries that hook into it, then no one's going to use it. Not everyone knows how to make a CPI in Rust. So it's fairly simple. Like our program is mainly like built on the primitives that other people have built. Like we're just using this. We're basically just constructing a CPI to mint collection V1, which is a compressed, which is of course the bubblegum contract. And like our program is really focused on like security and ownership by our customers. So every authority is owned by a project or a contract PDA and we have a structure that allows you to have a project level PDA, and then a organization level PDA. So if you have multiple people that you want to have access to the actual NFTs, then you can as well. And then of course, like we have like our overlord, I guess, like PDA, since we need that to actually interact with the contract as well.
Sure, but I could imagine, like, let's think big, Starbucks or something, that'll be Underdog as the main one, and then Starbucks has its own PDA, and then they can divide maybe like per country or per area, or maybe per like promotion, Halloween or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like breaking it up into per project, and then also having like org members and like control accounts to manage like all the transactions. So as a user, I don't have to think about anything related to like managing my SOL balance in my wallet or like keeping my private keys. We handle all of that for you in like a secure manner. So right now we use Solida to generate like a TypeScript library on top of these like contract methods. Oh, it's mad at me. And another important thing I feel like when you're developing code is having the computer do more of the work for you. So things I've like really set up in like our library are like prettier ESLint that automatically lints and like organizes my code, yells at me when I'm doing like super long lines. So just will auto fix everything for me. So I've added wrap, like this will like Solida will create like the instruction like TypeScript with all the types needed for you. And then if I'm going to be reusing this transaction everywhere, it's a lot of instructions that I need to pull together, or a lot of PDAs. So for example, like finding all the Underdog PDAs, since we have like 3 or 4 layers of like misdirection and PDAs, there's probably like 10, 15 PDAs sometimes I need to find. So like I've created all these helper functions. And I think one big learning as like developing over like a long period of time is like developers are lazy. If you write like a helper function that you need to copy and paste in different places, you're going to be really lazy to develop. But if you just have one function that you know exists there, find all the Underdog PDAs, and it makes life a lot easier. So creating the instruction and passing it into a version transaction, that's all like wrapped in this helper function. And we use like the latest like Solana tech. So we use like V0 transactions that allow you to attach lookup tables. So like if you're like wondering why I have like 20 accounts and it still works, it's because we have lookup tables set up. So this allows you to have like 4 or 5 instructions that have tons of accounts and bundle all of that together. So how does this actually work with the API? We have like a message queue system to process all of your transactions. So in this message queue, we have a create like mint compress NFT. Minting compressed NFTs is its own challenges, and happy to dive into this as well. But basically, we kind of cache like or get like cache like the NFT ID, or if you're more familiar with the compression code, like the leaf index for the compressed NFT that you're minting.
So you don't have to do the lookup over and over again.
Yeah. So and then this allows us to kind of like predetermine all the mint addresses for the NFT in that Merkle tree, and then we save that, and then we actually like mint the NFT on chain. There's like one of the things like developing on Solana is like when you send a transaction, it doesn't necessarily work. So like this run with retries loop is everywhere in the code when we're sending any transaction, and creating like helper functions to send these version transactions, being able to pass in like the block hash lookup tables as needed, and then updating the NFT itself. So how does this work so this worker system is like different than the program itself. So it's already like kind of 2 layers deep. And now let's dig ourselves out one more layer on the back end, like API. We use, again, like best practices here to manage API. So again, that itself is like 3 layers of misdirection, where you have services that actually handle the creation of the NFT itself. And this is all like unit tested as well. So like each of these services is well tested. And then you actually like find all the account addresses that you need, determine the next NFT ID, save that NFT, and tell the worker to do its job and actually mint it on chain. And then that service is called by the API, which is like our controller that takes in like, hey, this is a post to our NFT creation endpoint for this specific project. And we use like Zod for like validating all the API requests, so people can't just pass in like random garbage into the request, pull out the relevant information, figure out if we're creating a compressed NFT, transferable NFT, and so on, and then pass it to the service, and just like simple like project routing.
Right, and then the service drops it in the queue, and then it'll get handled ASAP.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of like digging ourselves from the contract all the way out to the user layer. So
right. Yeah, very cool. Very interesting to look at. I think what you just said in the beginning, there's literally like a small percentage Rust code involved. It's generally what gets built on top of it that makes it more interesting, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even touch like that. That was maybe like 50%, right? Like there's more layers built on top of that where like you stop at the API, but then there is an interface built on top of this API where the dashboard interacts with the API itself. And that's another set of like React components that you want to create, like hooks into the API calls, like the types of the API requests that you're getting. So you can even reduce the percentage that the Rust code is even smaller when you consider like the front ends that need to be built on top of the API and the worker service.
Right. Yeah. So actually, what happens on Solana is really the core of what needs to happen there, and the rest of it you can basically run it everywhere, practically, if you will, because the actual data is stored there. You just need to figure out how to get there.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge value add. Like when we were talking about like cookies as compressed NFTs, we really think about like blockchain. I think this is like our first principle is the separation of the data and service layer. And right now, like blockchain is used as like static PFPs, but there's very interesting data there, but it's very incomplete. It's like the only data that exists there right now is what I bought on Shopify, but not all the steps leading up to it. It's like I know all the people who bought DAA, but I don't know who showed up on the DAA mint site and didn't actually make that purchase, right? So with compression, we can start creating this data-rich blockchain that Tony was mentioning. And now this data is actually useful to create like a service layer on top of it. And Underdog essentially makes that service layer really easy to create.
That's very cool. So one of the things I think Web3 enables us that Web2 doesn't is user having ownership over their data, right? So user can basically control who sees what. Is this something that you guys considered for Underdog?
Yeah, Tony has a lot of thoughts on like data ownership as well. So on a technical level, like the non-transferable NFTs, like we don't drop them directly into people's wallets. Yeah, that's the only point of like where you actually have to sign and claim. With the with the compressed NFTs, like those are all burnable. So like you can, as a user, like if I went to the DAA site and I got a compressed NFT as like a tracking cookie, essentially, I could go in and be like, hey, let's burn this compressed NFT. I don't want this in my wallet. Right. And at the end of the day, like if I don't want my wallet to be associated with like this website, people always make a burner wallet anyways. And Tony can talk more about like data ownership and
Yeah, I think like the key question is like, why do I want my data hosted by NFTs? And this is a type of answer, I think, depending on who you're talking to, you're going to get different reactions. But what I've seen really resonate is like one, data liquidity, and two, power over your data. So like now you actually have this like excess liquidity of access to data, which is, hey, I want to prove my reputation in platform A, B, and C as a creator. I want to prove my reputation in TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook or Instagram. And I think like the second one is like this idea of power, right? Now I can aggregate all of my data and I have sovereignty over it. And like now I want to prove that I have this, right? And I think those are two really, really important notions that I just generally think we haven't been offered before. And that leads to the next question, which is, if that's the case, how do I protect my data, and how are you as a protocol giving me ownership or protecting or giving me privacy over this data? And I think the logical next step is like ZK, and how is Underdog thinking about implementing ZK, or how are you thinking about ZK in general? haven't we've given it thought, and I think the tech is just too like nascent at this time being
Sure.
on Solana for us to
Yeah.
do anything with it. But how we've thought about it, like, is if you want granularity into your data, which is I want to prove my ownership of X, Y, and Z without revealing all of my assets and my address, like you need ZK. If you want like true aggregation, I want to aggregate all of my accounts for like better airdrops through my reputation, like you're going to need ZK. But if you just want data out of your wallet, which is like, hey, I'm B-Man and I want my GitHub contributions to be on chain, so I can get first access. I'm just making stuff up, to bounties, to airdrops, to all this different stuff. Like I want data out of my wallet. That's something you can do without ZK. I think there's a lot of reasons. There's two big reasons why someone would want to bring this data on chain, and the next step is like privacy and security around it. And there's certain use cases where it's definitely necessary, and there's a big use case that I think is a low-hanging fruit, which is seeing your data, where ZK isn't necessary. So it's going to take some conditioning, I think, for like the everyday person to get used to something like this. But I think with people in Web3, specifically, the value just makes sense right away.
Yeah, I think so too. And I definitely like the idea of, like you said, composability. Somebody can choose to pull in. Somebody can choose to get like a specific data slice of data in. I might be interested in your Solarplex contributions, but not that much in your dialect interactions, right? So you can basically mix and match. And the other thing I'm interested about is like I'm happy to identify with some brand at this point, but that might change, right? My ideas about this brand might change. At some point, I might say, hey, actually, you know what? I actually don't want this trace of me being here. Like, sure, you can always find it when you dig deep, right? You can always like look at transactions, see how I got rid. But I don't want my relationship with like a company I don't like anymore, FTX, whatever. I don't want my relationship with FTX. I just basically want to disconnect this and then have that one triple to all the platforms that integrate Underdog. I think these kind of things are very powerful. And I really feel like the more things we bring on chain, the more these things like come to life and will manifest that way.
Yeah, I think 2 points, if I can make them. Number one is like a lot of Web3 experiences for NFTs, for example, is like, hey, we're going to do a whitelist thing, connect your Twitter, retweet, do everything here. All this data is in Web2, and we're using it to dictate something on chain. Why not just bring that data on chain and run a completely on chain process? I think that's number one, right? Yeah. I think that the second piece now is I have this obsession with ecosystems and building ecosystems. So when I was at Uber, I did some stuff close with the lending of cars, renting. And then if you rented a car, you got a gas card. And if you got a gas card, you got a maintenance card. And if you got a maintenance card, you got this and that, right? You built this whole ecosystem across the customer journey. And I think as people start to build on top of Underdog, there's like 25 projects so far that have done so. There's going to be more data on Underdog. And the more data that flows, the more data that can be used and shared between all of these projects. And so you can imagine a world where composability is already happening on top of the Underdog API. And now it's just about bringing that data on chain and using Underdog NFTs to capture all of those insights. But just two thoughts that I had.
Yeah, it's super interesting. You guys clearly had a lot of things going in mind. But just a little bit of backstory. Is this something you've been playing with before? I mean, you guys definitely put a lot of work in it. How did it actually born? Was it out of a like personal necessity for a project, or just something you figured, hey, this is a missing piece of infra?
Yeah, Kevin, you want to kick the story off?
Yeah, I think we'd been building in Solana for a long time. Like when I first started building in Solana, Anchor wasn't a thing. And then it was really hard to build. And the next layer is like, oh, really? You building a consumer application, and that's where we really started building. And like we were looking at like social tokens, NFTs for community management, and we were reinventing a lot of the same wheels just to get people to adopt the product. Like creating like gasless transactions, indexing the NFTs and like surfacing them to the communities, or just interacting with the contract. And when you're going to mint an NFT that's going to 10x or 100x, you're going to jump through every single hoop to get that money into your wallet. But when you're just using a normal application that feels a lot like a Facebook or a Hacker News, you're not necessarily going to jump through all those hoops.
Mm.
And how do we reduce that friction for end users to actually adopt Web3 applications? And that's kind of where that idea was born. And we needed to be able to plug into the things that people already do. So we had a really good conversation early on, like a couple months ago with Super Team, that really changed our mindset, where they loved kind of things that we were experimenting and building, but it was just an interface. And they already had things built in Airtable, in Discord, and they wanted to bring that information on chain. And it was very similar to what we'd already built. So that was really kind of the genesis of the API. We did a lot of customer research and business development at Breakpoint, just to learn more about like what solutions we could solve for, and realizing that everyone wanted to build the same thing, but they were. It goes back to that core competency point I was making, is you can't build a community, but also like have to build and understand like programs on Solana and the Metaplex standard and indexing all my NFTs. And being that primitive, that allows communities to focus on their core competencies, Super Team to focus on their bounties, and then now allow these communities to be like, hey, I could actually work together, like Dispatch Forums and Solarplex can now work together as Super Team, because they're thinking on the next layer instead of worrying about like, how do I manage all my NFTs? And that's really like that journey mentally. And like, I think this data one is a very recent kind of understanding on our end that there's more than just these non-transferable NFTs. And like Tony like brought up like compressed cookies once, and it didn't really click for a really long time. And then it just like made sense with, so Tony, maybe you can dive more into like kind of the data that we can start bringing on chain with compression.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we had been in Solana for a while, like Kevin hinted at, and our first like endeavor was social tokens. So we wanted to use this idea of like non-transferable NFTs between mentors and mentees to reward helpfulness, right? Like you'd bring that social capital you created off chain on chain. And so that was the first type of data that we really wanted to capture through NFTs. And I think, as Kevin's alluding to, we figured out really quickly it's fucking hard to build a consumer product, very hard. So then we started doing platforms, and platforms are like, hey, we want to capture this contribution data. We want to connect this about our users. We want to learn this about our users. And they said, oh, hey, your platform is really not that flexible. It's like, it's a great thing. You guys are on the right track, but it's just not working for us. And so like we started with social capital data. We went on to like contribution, and like I would almost say like employment, like work data about users. And then we went to Breakpoint. We did like our API was then built, and we said, hey, let's do Sandstorm. And we started to see a lot of people use our API like in a really fun way. And I think Parcel came in, which is a real estate derivatives platform. They're like, hey, we want to capture trading data on our users to use it for loyalty and rewards. We want to reward the people who have traded really early on our platform. And we started thinking like, well, this is really interesting. These NFTs are being used to like capture insights. And then Saga came, like we're doing the Saga rewards Genesis token. They're like, hey, we want to use an NFT, a non-transferable NFT, to prove ownership and capture activity within the dApp store. It's like, okay, now that's really interesting. Now these NFTs are definitely a way to capture data. So it was a journey of like, hey, there's different types of data that makes up this profile of our user. How can we use an NFT to capture that and then streamline a process to reward them or give them access, or essentially create like lifetime value? And I think as we think about the API and integrations, and what's important is businesses are looking for ways to integrate Web3 without hiring a lot of people, without spending a lot of time. They want it to just fit into their current workflows. So like, how do we do that? Integrations. Second piece is like, how do you get a better picture of your customers? NFTs. And like now I think like we're learning what type of data, what type of tools businesses really need to capture in order to create these fun experiences. And teams like Saga, teams like Parcel, hopefully Dialect down the line, are teams that are like really, really helpful in figuring this stuff out and creating like fun customer experiences.
Yeah, awesome. One of the things that I can kind of see, I think, is you guys been working, building, chewing a bunch of glass, figuring out, and then abstracting, taking a few steps back, and then seeing how all these problems compare to each other. then building something to fix that right way to look at it. So basically seeing
definitely.
problems people have and then abstracting it out, which I think is generally a good way of engineering. So just don't start with the solution at hand, figure out what the issue actually is. And then, because I think if you would have started building this, like, let's say a year ago, you would probably come up with something very different and maybe not as useful. Whereas if you go this way around, you kind of know that you can at least fill a few voids that you've seen. So super interesting.
And I think it's also a really good way of building a startup in crypto, which is these problems start off like really small. And as you start to actually build and learn with your community, you realize how big a problem actually is and how much pain it is. And so what it requires of a founder and a builder is just to be really flexible. And I think one of the things that me and Kevin got along with really early is he's a hacker. He's a true hacker. Like, he just builds to build sometimes, and you get distracted really early on. And so I'd say, like, hey, here's what we're trying to figure out. This is what we need to build. And so, like, founders, builders, I'm guilty of this myself. Like, once they find out that a problem is evolving, they need to be flexible and say, like, hey, here's like the vision that I have and for the world. Here's the problem and how it's been changing. Here's how my solution is going to bridge that to this, right? And now it's just like working through that. So I think it's also a great way to build in Web3 because things change all the time here.
Yeah. I think that's a great call. Definitely also Dialect, which I think is a great example in the ecosystem, which as soon as they heard Saga, they kind of pivoted it all and went all in on mobile. And I think it's been amazing. It's like one of the favorite mobile apps currently I have in Web3 space, at least. It's just, it's very cool. Yeah, awesome. So I think one of the things that I'm interested in, we live in a world where everybody has multiple wallets. It's kind of recommended, right? We have our ledgers, we have our browser wallets, and then like Dialect gave me another wallet, and then whatever app I'm starting to use giving all wallets. Do you have any thoughts about how these things can connect in and how I can basically identify with, hey, I'm this Dialect user B-Man, but I'm also B-Man on Backpack, and I'm bman.sol, which is just my Phantom wallet. Any ideas around this, how these things can link up and basically represent the same person?
Yeah, I think Dialect is doing some wallet like syndication feature that connects all the wallets together. And it's not a core problem that I think we're solving for. But how we think about it is we want to create reasons for users to build this identity together. So what that looks like is right now a lot of venture money being raised goes to Google and Facebook. And that's because the useful data sits in the data silos of Google and Facebook, so they get all the money. But if more of this data sits on the public blockchain, going back to that data and service layer separation, bringing more of this data to the public blockchain, more of the incentives and more of this money to acquire customers goes on chain. And we're already seeing this with like airdrops, but that kind of incentive is for just a single wallet. It's like, did this wallet log into like OpenSea and make a trade? But I think what we're seeing we're going to see down the line is multiplayer like commerce happening on chain. And we're already seeing small examples of this, like Tony mentioned, is this composability across different applications. For example, like teasing this out a little bit, like with Super Team and Dispatch Forum / Solarplex, like being able to bring the reputation and experience points that you've garnered in Super Team for the bounties and work that you've done, and then logging to Solarplex and seeing all of that show up already. And then maybe a cross collaboration like airdrop for people that participated in both communities. So that really is an incentive for you to log into the same wallet in these two. And if you add another community on top of that, not only does that add like complexity in like the Web 2 world of this, it increases the order of magnitude where I have to learn a new API or a new database I need to connect with. With the Underdog API, NFTs become the new data standard. The only API you have to learn is Underdog and how to get the NFTs, and basically makes like the scaling of like these multiplayer type experiences like linear scale instead of exponential, because everything is the same. Everything is an NFT as a data standard. So
yeah, NFT as a data standard. I love that idea. It's really interesting. And I'm a mentor in the Solana Collective, and we help people in the Solana ecosystem to build there, but not only build, also market, just brainstorm ideas. We have an experience system, so it's definitely something I'm going to drop in the group. See if we can, can leverage Underdog to do this. I participated in. I'd love to look at this, and I think so. This is one of the other things you guys build on top of giants, right? Strata protocol is amazing, and Helium they're doing. I mean, GigaBrain Noah is building out a bunch of stuff there. You'd happily use their work. I think this is something that's really something new, and I mean, not new per se. We've been doing open source for like, I don't know, 25 years or something, but having the ability to actually have something useful that's just there that you can just plug into, that's kind of amazing, right? I couldn't leverage Facebook's API for something, even if I wanted. It's like a huge business risk to do so. Like, look at what happened with Twitter. Like, they started like killing off API access like half a year ago. If your business built on that, you're screwed. And like having stuff on chain, even if you guys pull the plug, I mean, I can still interact with this data. Data's still there. You could not get rid of it probably even if you want it. And this is something that's like super powerful. And I think, definitely something we should look at embracing. So
and like even in that those few sentences, like you mentioned multiple APIs, right? Like you mentioned Twitter, you mentioned Facebook, and people are working with like Notion, Twitter, or Notion, Airtable, and you have to learn every single API. And that's why a company like Zap is super powerful, right? Because no one wants to manage the keys for every API. But how can you now simplify it down to just making data as simple as an NFT? And that's really a huge unlock for developers and services that build on top of us.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, very cool. I think it's been amazing talking to you guys about Underdog. I'm curious if there's anything you'd like to share, anything to add here, future plans that we haven't discussed yet, or just anything else you got to plug or you want to show, Kevin?
We have compression coming out soon, and we're looking for people to build on top of the API to make compression easy. So great.
Yeah, I'll take that definitely to the collective team. I'll make them watch the video so they can see what it's all about. Tony, anything you want to add to the above?
Yeah, compression, and if you want to build on top of the API, shoot me a DM. I've got codes and codes and codes, so happy to get you started on the company's dime. Screw burn.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, perfect. I'm super excited having you guys on. I think I'm the first one that got you after winning, so that's a big honor for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope it was interesting for you as well, and you have some kind of a reference if you want to show people what it's all about. I wish you all the luck today with your demos and talking to the VCs, and I hope it'll finalize something so that you can start building again, because it looks like that's one of the things you do, but you'd love to do most. So yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. It was a great pleasure having you here.
Appreciate it, B-Man.
Catch you all guys later.
Yeah, appreciate it, B-Man.
Thanks.